Good afternoon, everyone. I will be discussing about the summaries of the Leviathan and the social contract. So first, with the Leviathan, Hobbes argues that peace and social unity can be best achieved by the establishment of a commonwealth through a social contract. Hobbes' ideal commonwealth is ruled by a sovereign power who is responsible for securing the protection of the people and granted absolute authority to ensure the common defense. Hobbes' commonwealth is composed of the body of the citizens with the sovereign as its head, so it is basically viewed as an artificial person. The commonwealth is named after a monstrous sea creature which was mentioned in the book of Job in the Leviathan. And in the first book, Hobbes discusses about the elementary motions of matters. He further argued that every aspect of human nature can be deduced from materialist principles, and the state of nature, which is a natural condition of mankind, is inherently violent and awash with fear. It is also characterized by the war of every man against every man. Furthermore, in Book 2, he discusses about the rights of the sovereign and the subject, as well as the legislative and the civil mechanics of the government. For Hobbes, he discusses that the best form of government is monarchy. He lays out different reasons why he said that the monarchy is the best kind of government. First, because the monarch can obtain the advice of his counselors in private. That second, that the policies of the monarch would be constant and consistent since he is of one head. Third, that the government will be generally stable since the method of succession will be decided by the sovereign himself. Next, he also argued that the people can leave the Commonwealth, especially if the Commonwealth becomes too oppressive or when the Commonwealth fails to protect the people. But Hobbes warns that to leave the Commonwealth is actually to return to the state of nature. Moreover, in his third book, he argues the conflict between divine and civil laws. He argues that divine and civil laws should not be opposing each other, since civil laws are basically rooted upon natural laws, upon which divine laws are also rooted. So they have just the same basis. So there should not be any conflict between the two. Next, in his last book, he tries to debunk the false religious beliefs that has been perpetuated by different persons who claim that they have an access to the divine. Hobbes argues that the kingdom of God will never be present on earth, and that civil laws and divine laws must be under the sovereign.
We will now be discussing about the summary of the social contract. Let us now delve into the important topics that have been discussed in the book. First, social contract. Social contract is an agreement between individuals in order for them to enter into the civil society. Rousseau argues that it is only through entering into the civil society that we could be able to become entirely human. He also argues that if you want to enter into a civil society, you have to sacrifice your own physical freedom of being able to do whatever you want to do, whatever you are pleased to do, and obtain a higher civil freedom of being able to act rationally and morally. He also further delved into the issue of freedom and liberty, and he argued that the problem of liberty is the motivating factor in his book, Social Contract. He also talked about the state of nature, in which he described the physical freedom of individuals of being able to act without restraint. But he also argued on the contrary that these individuals are just merely like animals who are slaves into their own impulses and instincts. He also talked about the sovereign as the voice of the law and the absolute authority in the land. During Rousseau's time, the sovereign is always an absolute monarch. But in his book, The Social Contract, he gave it an entirely different meaning. For him, in a healthy state, the sovereign is composed of the citizens acting collectively, voicing out the general will and the laws of the state. For him, he also distinguished that the government is a completely different entity from the sovereign. The government has its own corporate will, which is often at odds with the sovereign's general will. For him also, he also posited that the sovereign cannot be represented. It could never be divided or broken upon. by in any case. He also outlined 3 different forms of government: monarchy, democracy, and aristocracy. And he further talked about the laws as an abstract expression of the general will, which is universally acceptable. The laws exist in order for the subjects to become loyal to the sovereign. More so, he also distinguished between the difference of the general will and the will of all. The will of all is merely the sum total of all the individual's particular will, while the general will is the common good of the state. Finally, the common good aims at the best interest of the society. It is what the social contract wants to achieve and what the general will aims at.